Give me just 1 second. Okay, yeah. So 1A, it's titled "Living in the Media Age." Now, this book is from like 2014 or 2015. So and it's not that it's dated by any means. That's not, only 6 years old. This isn't dated, but some of the references might be a little different, But the concept of a logical argument is important. I think, whenever we were developing this class, one of the one of the issues is developing a college level math class that isn't algebra based is more like, well, what do we need? What is, I mean, the bigger picture, like 10,000 foot picture is, what do we need as a society? And in my opinion, logic and critical thinking skills are what we need as a society, and it'll just help everybody out. So this first chapter really kind of focuses on that idea of logic, critical thinking, also, understanding, not argument's not the right word. They bring up the word argument, but it's more about understanding how to prove your case, or if someone else is proving their case correctly. So it's and really seeing through kind of the BS in a way that we're all bombarded by right now. And actually, we've been bombarded by it for a long time, and just it's always the worst right now, right? So it's that kind of idea that chapter 1 starts with, which is kind of nice. So if you're following the book, if not, that's fine. But I'm going to make a few definitions, because to make this logical critical thinking section work, you have to define certain words. And some of these words we use already, in day-to-day living, but we haven't necessarily defined them. So I'm going to write some down, and this is mainly if you don't have the book, but I'm going to write some down so we have kind of a definition for the class on what these concepts are. So let me switch my screen here. Okay, the first one, and this is on page 6, and it's the very first definition that your book gives, is logic, and it's the study of the methods and principles of reasoning. So logic, when you hear the word logic, I want you to think really it's this studying reasoning, studying the methods of reasoning. I'll write it that way: studying the methods of reasoning. Okay. And then there's an argument uses a set of facts or assumptions. So we have to be careful. Argument. So it's going to use a set of facts or assumptions called premises. So they contain premises, which are a set of facts or assumptions. And the goal is to use these premises to support your conclusion, right? So the goal is to use the premises, to support the conclusion. So we've got argument, we've got logic, and really we have premises and a conclusion built in there as well. And then your book then goes over the definition of a fallacy. And a fallacy, it defines it very kind of broadly. It's a deceptive argument, an argument in which the conclusion is not well supported by the premises. So a fallacy is a deceptive argument. We'll really define it that way: deceptive argument. So, it has a conclusion, but it's not really well supported by the premises that it states. So it's going to give us some sort of premises, and then it's saying, due to these premises, here's the conclusion. But the issue is there's a fallacy there. It's not really true. And your book then starts on these common fallacies. And there's a lot. I mean, if we look at the next few pages, there's a lot of of fallacies going on, or they call them common fallacies. And I want you to really pay attention to these over the next few days, because I want you to find these fallacies are not hard to find. Okay, if you click on any social media website, you will find these fallacies thrown around, very, very in your face almost, depending on how much you care about certain topics. But these fallacies are thrown around, and I would really, I'm going to kind of request that if you find one, send it to me. So if you see one, you can take a screenshot of it, you can snip it, however you want to do it, and send it to me, or just kind of tell me what it is. Send it to me, and then we can kind of, and you kind of tell me which fallacy you believe it lines up with, and I can use that for future reference. Okay, and we can use it in class too. Maybe I'll use it on the test, and you'll know the answer already. Okay, so if you come across some of these fallacies over the next few days, just send them to me, please. I'm requesting that. Okay, so your book then goes over common fallacies. Yeah, and in the very first sentence, on page 6 on common fallacies is what I'm saying. Fallacies in the media are so common that it is nearly impossible to avoid them. The first one that your book goes over is the appeal to popularity. Okay, so we're going to start there. We're going to just list these out. Appeal to popularity. Ooh, that's not how you spell appeal. Appeal to popularity. And I like the example they give. They say, look, Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. More people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck. Now, the issue is you got to define what the premise and the conclusion are. So in this one, I'll kind of break it down. Your book does too, but I'll break it down for you. So again, it says Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. More people drive Ford pickup trucks than ever. Well, it starts with the conclusion here that Ford makes the best pickups, right? The premise, so we'll write this down. The premise is that, look, if more people drive Ford pickup, more people drive Ford than anything else, right? More people drive a Ford. The conclusion is that they make the best pickups in the world. Truck in the world. So actually, they stated their conclusion first, which is fine. But this is a great example of a fallacy. I mean, just because more people drive the truck does not mean that it's the best truck in the world. Now, it does mean it's the most popular in the world. You could say that. That would not be a fallacy, right? If more people drive a Ford truck, then it must be the most popular truck in the world. Yeah, that's true. But now, does it mean it's the best? Well, no, not really. I mean, this, yeah, sometimes this is actually called to the appeal to majority as well. And it just because it's more popular or it, this happens in commercials a lot, right? Just because they're trying to say, hey, so many people do these things, it must be the best thing to do. That's just not true. It's a nice common fallacy that your mom probably used, like, if all your friends were jumping off the bridge, does that mean you do it? That kind of thing. That's just it's an appeal to popularity. But all my buddies are doing this one thing, right? You tried it on your parents at some point, and it didn't work. Okay, so the next one is the false cause. The false cause. So the example of the book says, look, I placed the quartz crystal on my forehead, and in 5 minutes, my headache was gone. The crystal made my headache go away, right? Now, the premise is, so this one actually kind of breaks it down. The statement's a lot better, and it has two premises. We're going to start. These are good examples of breaking down arguments, right? We've got premise 1. Put the crystal on my forehead. Right? Premise 2. Headache's gone, right? So therefore, the conclusion, Crystal must have done it, right? Crystal made the headache go away. So, and your book says, look, this premise, the premises tell us that one thing happened before another, but they don't prove any conclusion between them. That is, we can't conclude the crystal actually caused the forehead or caused the headache to go away, right? Yeah, this is the false cause fallacy. So look, it's just a false cause. Like you can't tell me that, the putting the crystal on your forehead, the headache goes. It's kind of like searching for the, I don't know if you guys have heard, if you got a stitch, search for an arrowhead and then it'll go away. I think my grandfather told me that when I was little. Well, all it does is it makes your brain quit thinking about the stitch, and eventually your stitch goes away. It has nothing to do with the arrowhead, right? Or you searching for the arrowhead. So, again, good. It's a good example of a false cause. So we've got appeal to popularity, false cause, and then your book goes over hasty generalization, and I think this is one that I've seen a lot of lately. I'm gonna kind of quit writing these because it's just a lot. I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna go back to my face. Okay, so the next one is hasty generalization, and your book gives the example. 2 cases of childhood leukemia have occurred along the street where the high voltage power lines run. The power lines must be the cause of these illnesses, right? This is just a nice hasty generalization, false cause. And there's a famous conspiracy going around right now in the media, right? Or I say in the media, about like 5G towers causing COVID, right? It's like, okay, well, they're putting 5G towers in at the same time that COVID hits, boom. 5G's got to be the reason we have COVID. I think that's how it is. I've tried to listen to it. It's really hard to listen to arguments that have a fallacy to them, right? It doesn't make any sense. And there's a reason it's hard to follow a lot of times, and it's because it's not logical. Okay. That's the same kind of idea. So the hasty generalization is that, hey, this one thing happened, boom. It must be because like these 2 kids on the street got leukemia. There's a power line that runs by them. Power lines causing leukemia. Oh, hey, they're putting in 5G towers at the same time the coronavirus hits. 5G towers are causing coronavirus. I don't know if that's actually the conspiracy, but that seems to be what the conspiracy I've heard based off of it. I try not to follow that stuff that much, but those are really good examples of hasty generalization. You're just saying, hey, something, just because something happened right before something else doesn't mean that it's necessary. You're generalizing the idea that it happened, right? That's a hasty generalization. Okay, that's the third one. Was that third? Oh, you know what? I skipped one. I'm sorry, I skipped one. Let's go back to example 3 in the book, which is appeal to ignorance. So appeal to ignorance. So this this one says, scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens visiting Earth. Therefore, anyone who claims to have seen a UFO must be hallucinating, right? Now, of course, if we strip this to the argument, it says the premise is there's no proof that aliens have visited Earth, and the conclusion is aliens have not visited Earth. The fallacy should be clear. A lack of proof of aliens visiting does not mean that the visits have not occurred, okay? So the fallacy is called appeal to ignorance because it uses ignorance, lack of knowledge, about the truth of a proposition to conclude the opposite. We sometimes sum up this fallacy with the statement, an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, okay? That's the appeal to evidence. Just because you don't have evidence does not mean is not evidence of absence, right? Just because, yeah. So what's another example of this? If you guys can think of one, let me know. But just because it doesn't happen doesn't mean it's not that just because it doesn't happen doesn't mean it's true. It's more though, just because we like the evidence of it doesn't mean that that's evidence in itself, right? Just because we haven't seen, just because there hasn't been a recording of a UFO doesn't mean that it hasn't happened, right? Now, there's other reasons to make conclusions about why UFOs exist or don't exist, but that the way of saying they don't exist based on this lack of evidence is it's a hard way to do that. You can't, that's actually appeal to ignorance. Okay, and then I said, I went over hasty generalization. I skipped over that one. So we've done 4 so far. We've got appeal to popularity, false cause, appeal to ignorance, and hasty generalization. So let's go to the 5th one your book goes over, which is limited choice. It says, look, you don't support the president, so you're not a patriotic American. Okay, this argument has the form, look, if you don't support the president, automatically, boom, you are not a patriot. And there's very limited choice here, that the assumption that is what, it's almost like a hasty generalization in a way, but they're trying to narrow it down. Like, if you don't do this one totally separate thing, then you must be this, right? There's no connection to the two. So it's a very limited choice. I mean, the book says, look, the argument suggests that there are only 2 types of Americans, right? Patriotic ones who support the president and unpatriotic ones who don't. But there are many other possibilities, such as being patriotic while disliking a particular president. There's nothing wrong in that, okay? So it limits the choice where it makes you, it just limits the choice, and it makes it where you're one or the other, right? When actually you can have many different options. Now, sometimes there are one or the other options, and sometimes there are yes, no kind of options. But in this example, there's not. You can have other options and still be a patriotic American. Okay, so 6 is appeal to emotion. In ads for Michelin tires, a picture of a baby is shown with the words, because so much is riding on your tires, right? So the premise is that, hey, you love your baby. So the conclusion is you should buy Michelin tires, right? That makes complete sense, right? It's a nice logical fallacy that, of course, we use all the time in advertising. Or say we, it's used a lot of time in advertising, especially when it comes to that kind of idea. Like insurance companies use this all the time, right? Oh, you want to protect your family, you gotta use Allstate, or protect yourself from mayhem. I guess you gotta use Allstate. But the advertisers, I'm just reading from the book a little bit. The advertisers hope that the love you feel for a baby will make you want to buy their tires. So it's this emotional draw in that, okay, if you really loved your kid, you'd buy these Michelin tires. If you don't, you love your kid, you're going to buy some other tire, right? And that's just it's a beautiful fallacy. Personal attack. So they give this example of a conversation for personal attack. It says, Gwen, you should stop drinking because it's hurting your grades, endangering people when you drink and drive, and destroying your relationship with your family. Merle, what a beautiful name, Merle. I've seen you drink a few times, or I've seen you drink a few too many on occasion yourself, right? So what Merle is attacking Gwen, but not attacking the argument. Okay, so that's considered a personal attack. Whenever she can't dispute what the other person is saying, and she goes after Merle and say, "Well, you drank too." That's a fallacy. That's the personal attack fallacy, where you're not attacking the argument, you're attacking the person. Okay, that makes, and this is used all the time. And sometimes I think your book kind of goes over using it in court. It's used a lot, like if for a witness, sometimes you might use it, or if you're the defendant and you're the prosecution lawyer is trying to paint the picture of who this person is. It's like, oh yeah, just because they do X, Y, and Z doesn't necessarily mean they're a murderer, right? And that's I kind of feel that's a good example of it. But it's used but it's still a fallacy. And a defense attorney will kind of work through that. Yeah, like, oh yeah, they do drink too much. A lot of people drink too much. That doesn't mean they're a murderer, right? So it's that personal attacking. If you can't prove that they did it, I'm going to start attacking the person, right? Instead of trying to prove what they actually did. Okay, circular reasoning, which is interesting. I'll tell you, circular is the hardest for me to kind of grasp sometimes. But so circular reasoning, the example is a society has an obligation to provide health insurance because healthcare is a right to citizens. And the way, I'm going to just kind of read this one straight from the book. It says, look, this argument states the conclusion that society has an obligation to provide health insurance before the premise which healthcare is a human right. But if you read carefully, you'll recognize that the premise and the conclusion both say essentially the same thing, as social obligations are generally based on definitions of accepted rights. So this argument suffers from circular reasoning. So it's really when the premise and the conclusion are the same. It's not that the premise, or it's not that the premise leads you to the conclusion. It's that it kind of wraps itself in a circle. The book, if you've got it out on page 9, it gives kind of a nice visual of that. But it's, like this premise is true, and then P is related to it in different words, and it just comes back to the premise being true. It doesn't bring it back to a conclusion, okay, or it doesn't bring it to a conclusion. It just works in a circle. And then there's the red herring, which is a very common one, the diversion fallacy, which, okay, so the book says, we should not continue to fund cloning research because there are so many ethical issues involved. Decisions are based on ethics, and we cannot afford too many ethical loose ends. So, and the book does a good example of just tearing this one apart. It says, look, the argument begins with its conclusion. So the conclusion is we should not continue funding cloning research. That's a conclusion. However, the discussion is all about ethics. It's not about cloning. It's saying, look, this argument represents the fallacy of diversion because it attempts to divert attention from the real issue of cloning research by focusing on another issue, ethics. It says the issue to which attention is diverted is sometimes called a red herring. And this is interesting. A herring is a fish that turns red when rotten. Use of the term red herring to mean a diversion can be traced back to the 19th century, when British fugitives discovered that they could divert bloodhounds from their pursuit by rubbing a red herring across their trail. Note that personal attacks are often used as diversion. So personal attacks and diversions are similar, right? A personal attack, though, is kind of a specific type of diversion. Instead of, it's a diversion personally going at someone. Where the red herring fallacy, it just starts focusing on a different issue, right? Where, I feel like I saw this one recently with something in the media that popped up, and I thought, okay, well, that's not even, and I do think it was probably something, the healthcare debate that comes up, the whatever it was, I think it was healthcare debate, because it started talking about, personal rights and things of that nature, and it really wasn't about the conclusion or the argument trying to be made was about whether we should fund healthcare or not, or whether we could fund it. That's what it was. It was, could we fund, some nationalized version of healthcare? And instead of the argument being if we could or could not, if we had the money to do it, or if we didn't, or if what we'd have to do to get the money to do it, which is its own argument. Whoever that they were talking to was going on to more like political issues on it, and not the actual argument that was being brought up, which was, could we afford it, right? Which is a different argument than is it right or wrong, almost, right? Or does it fit in this this political belief, right? We shouldn't do that because we're going to lose something else. No, that's not what the question was. The question that was proposed was, can we afford it, right? And if we can't afford it, that's fine. Just go down that rabbit hole of why we can't or why we can. So that was a good red herring, diversion type argument. Next is the straw man. I think that's the last one, right? No, yeah, the last one that your book goes over. So there's 10 examples total. Is straw man. So suppose that the mayor of a large city proposes decriminalizing drug possession in order to reduce overcrowding in jails and save money on enforcement. So his challenger in the upcoming election says, hey, the mayor doesn't think there's anything wrong with drug use, but I do, right? This is a nice straw man. These are always nice when you see them. It's like, no, the mayor's reasoning behind decriminalizing the drug possession is to reduce overcrowding in jails and save money on law enforcement, right? He's looking at more of the bottom line aspect of it. But of course, the challenger's like, oh, no, man, this guy is totally okay with people using drugs, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? So the analysis, of course, the mayor did not say that drug use is acceptable. That's not what he stated. That was the that was an assumption that the other person made, right? His proposal for decriminalization is designed to solve another problem, which is overcrowding of jails, and tells us nothing about his general views on drug use. The speaker has distorted the mayor's views, and any argument based on a distortion of someone's words or beliefs is called a straw man. So the term comes from the idea that the speaker has used a poor representation of a person's beliefs in the same way that a straw man is a poor representation of a real man. Okay. A straw man is similar to diversion. The primary difference is that a diversion argues against an unrelated issue, while the straw man argues against a distorted version. So it is, yeah, it's a diversion, but it's more of a distorted version of, it's a distorted version of what the person is attempting to argue. Okay, so that is the, that's the 10 examples. And if you've got the book, it starts on page 6 and it goes to page 10. So 10 examples of common fallacies is what your book calls them, in the book. And the last example that your book goes over, or actually kind of goes over techniques on how to evaluate media information. And I'm hoping you know this already. I'm going to go over it like you haven't, but it's really important and it's really hard, honestly, I believe, in this day and age to do these, that what we're about to talk to. And honestly, it's kind of hard to talk about it because I don't mean it. I don't care about politics. I don't care left or right. That's not what I'm talking about. It's really just finding what you believe is the right sources, or credentially, what are the best sources for media, the media. So the book has 5 steps to evaluating media information. 1 is consider the source. Is the source of the information clear? Does the source have credibility on this issue? I have an issue. This pops up for me a lot because I follow sports. There's certain sport teams that I follow, and every now and then they'll post something that's not sports related. I'm not saying it's politics, but it's just not sports related. And I'm like, why are they talking? They're not the experts at talking about it. There's nothing wrong if it's an opinion piece, right? There's nothing wrong in giving your opinion, but you got to be careful if it's an opinion or if they're trying to state it like a fact, right? So just be careful. If my team's sports announcer tweets out that he doesn't like, or orange juice is the worst breakfast beverage, I don't know where he's coming from. That it sounds like a truth statement, right? Sounds like he's come to a conclusion based on facts, but in actuality, it's just an opinion. And he's a sports writer. I don't understand why he's writing that other than just to be goofy or whatnot. But that's kind of a goofy example, right? So be careful with the source of the material, and do they have credibility with the issue? Second is check the date. Can you determine when the information was written? Is it still relevant or is it outdated? I'll tell you, this happened yesterday with me. I was looking there. Somebody posted something to get something riled up on, some social media thing, and I was looking at it, and it was a video, and something didn't look right because it showed a scene and that could cause a lot of emotion, but no one in the scene had a mask on, and they were acting as if this had occurred, recently. And it wasn't, it was in like a public area, like a mall or something. But not a single person had a mask on. And I was like, okay, this doesn't look right. And I kind of clicked on the video and I looked down and they're like, yeah, this video is from 3 or 4 years ago. It's not about the current stuff going on. So I was like, oh yeah, that's a good example of checking the date, right? Just check the date. A lot of stuff, it's okay. Things change. Science and arguments and logic, they change things along the way, right? So because things change, you have to be careful about when the material was printed and when it was given out. Now, some things don't change, and it's okay to use sources from previous years, but you got to be careful on what the topic is, on if it could have changed recently, and still using that same source. 3, validity accuracy. So can you validate the information from other sources? Do you have good reason to believe it is accurate? Does it contain anything that makes you suspicious? If you've got that gut feeling like something's not right. Like I'm telling you, that gut feeling when I watched that video, I thought this is just some public area in a mall and not a single person is wearing a mask right now. Now, I know a lot of people don't wear masks. That's their whatever. I'm not going to go into that argument, but somebody's going to be wearing a mask in this big group. Okay. And so like, that's what kind of, they gave me the, something suspicious about this. But also that first statement, can you validate this information from other sources, right? This becomes important. If you've got more than one or two or three sources coming together from different angles, even, it can validate the accuracy. 4, watch for hidden agendas. Is the information presented fairly and objectively, or is it manipulated to serve some particular or hidden agenda? Look, I'm going to tell you, we are biased creatures. It's part of being a human. Okay, and it makes it really hard to have that conversation sometimes about validity, because we are biased and we all have biasness, and it's an issue. Like my background really is in statistics, and it's a major issue in statistics because when you go to researching something, you already have this inherent biasness. I'll tell you, I'm working on a dissertation right now, and it's on the funding of higher education. Well, I automatically have a bias. I work in higher ed. I'm a faculty member. I get paid from this, I'm researching this formula that pays higher education. So there's just a lot of biasness involved in it. And so I have to be very careful to try to take out my biasness whenever I go to writing, go to researching. And that's why for me, it'll be the peer-reviewed aspect. So the peer review aspect will hopefully take out as much biasness as possible. Sometimes it's just hard. I mean, we're all human, and that's just part of being a human. And it's okay to be biased, and it's okay. You got to understand, it's okay for other people to be biased too. And sometimes we don't want that, but especially if they have a different kind of bias than we do. But when you're reading an article or watching the news, if you can kind of put on your bias hat and just say, okay, yeah, I believe in what this guy's saying. I think he or she is, right on board. But is it because I'm biased, or is it because it's the truth? I mean, are they stating it like an opinion? Now, an opinion's one thing. If they say, gosh, I think orange juice is the best breakfast drink, right? Yeah, I do too. That guy's smart. I like him, right? I'm going to watch more of his news. So is it because I feel the same way and it's presented as opinion, or are they stating something as a fact that I feel as well, that I have that same kind of bias towards? So you just have to be careful. And there's a lot of emotion that goes into this aspect of validity, especially right now. Jesus, right now, and I mean it's been around for a while. People have been complaining about, especially the news media, for a long time about being biased, and there's a lot of truth to it. But sometimes it's best to, even if you're watching whatever your favorite news show is, if you have one, to just still put on that hat and say, okay, wait a minute, is this just really appealing to my already biased feelings about these topics? Okay, don't miss the big picture. That's the last one. Even if a piece of media information passes all the above tests, step back and consider whether it makes sense. For example, does it conflict with other things you think are true? And if so, how can you resolve that? So if it seems like a good source, if the date's correct, I mean, if we're watching, I'm thinking more like recent news, right? The dates are going to be more correct because it's recent. If it's valid and accurate, and there's other sources that can validate it, and if we don't think there's a hidden agenda, just step back and think, okay, is this, is it true? Does it conflict with other things that you think might be true, right? And maybe it does. I mean, maybe you really believe that orange juice is the best breakfast drink, right? And someone writes this article. They're an expert in breakfast drink field, right? They have other sources to cite that it turns out no, chocolate milk is the best breakfast drink, and they don't seem to have an agenda. They don't work for the dairy community, right? They're not part of that lobbying group for the dairy farmers. and it was written pretty recent, I guess. And maybe orange juice isn't right, or maybe it is. Maybe I am right. Maybe orange juice is the best breakfast drink, right? But it's just being very careful about the source. And look, if I get told chocolate milk's the best breakfast drink, and I read that it's funded by the Dairy Farmers Union, I'm throwing that out the window, right? I mean, that's a very that's a hidden agenda going on. I mean, not hidden, I guess, if they're stating it, but they definitely have an agenda. Okay, so your book goes over an example of that, but the main idea in this first section is catching those fallacies, and that's why I want you to really open up your eyes and ears. We've got a week before the next class, right? Monday we're out. If you're watching this later, like in a few semesters, our class has Monday out. I'm going to save these videos for later. But I want you to really kind of pay attention to this. And look, you can send me examples. Send me all the examples you find. I enjoy these. And I don't care if they're one way or another. Please don't make any assumptions about my beliefs and things. So just send them to me. And we can hash them out. We can kind of decide, of these 10, which one are they? Which fallacy are they, right? If you're struggling to figure out the fallacy. If not, just tell me what it is, and we'll figure it out. Okay, this is good stuff. I already found one, and I found it for class, and it had an expletive in it, and I didn't even realize it until I thought, oh yeah, this would be perfect for class. But nah, I can't use it with an expletive. I know we're all adults here, but that wouldn't be the best thing. Okay, so for homework, this is in section 1A. So in section 1A, yeah, I like how your book does this homework too, by the way. Hold on a second. Let me check one thing. I've got the teacher edition, so I'm just making sure it's the right. Yeah, okay, good. I want you to do 1 through, I say 1. I want you to start on the exercises. So on page 12, let me write this out. Hold on, I'll write it out so you can see what I'm talking about. On page 12, you'll see there's an exercise section. So your book does a quick quiz and an exercise. You're more than welcome to do the quick quiz to see where you're at. But we're going to do the exercises in this class, okay? Oh, I've already got the homework up, don't I? It's in this class. I already did it. Oh, yeah. It's in your schedule. I forgot. Yeah, it's 1. I want you to do 1 through 51. Yeah, and just do the odd. If you want to do the even, that is a-okay. But I just want you to do 1 through 51 odd.
I think just what?
What's up? Patience, I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was
that's okay.
unmuted. I got all my babies here today. I'm
sorry.
I
got you. No. It's a-okay. So page 12, exercise 1A, I want you to do 1 through 51 odd. Okay. And then now let's go on to 1B. 1B, now I'm going to leave it on here because we're going to write a little bit more for 1B. 1B is on propositions and truths. And this is when we really kind of get, this actually is kind of mathy. It's not like a fallacy aspect. We're gonna state some more logic, but it's based on premises and conclusions and things of that nature. So the first thing your book talks about in 1B is a proposition. So a proposition makes a claim, either an assertion or a denial, that may be either true or false. It must have the structure of a complete sentence. Okay, so proposition, it's either true or false. And must be a complete sentence. I think this is actually kind of the fun stuff. All right, the fallacy stuff's fun, but this is fun as well. So the book gives an example, a few examples of this, and I'm just going to steal their examples. That Joan is sitting in the chair. That is a proposition because it's a complete sentence that makes an assertion, right? I did not take the pen. It's a proposition because it's a complete sentence that makes a denial, right? I did not take the pen. Are you going to the store? Not a proposition, right? Because it is a question. It does not assert or deny anything. So a proposition has to assert or deny something. Mr. Shirley is a math faculty member. That is a proposition, right? Your book then says 3 miles south of here. Well, that's not a proposition. It doesn't make any claim, and it's not even a complete sentence. And then the last thing, equations are propositions. So the book says 7 plus 9 equals 2. Now it's a proposition. It's false, right? 7 plus 9 does not equal 2, but it's still a proposition. It can be read as a complete sentence, and it makes a distinct claim, okay? So they're either true or false, and they're complete sentences, and you can kind of add on to this. They make a distinct claim. And then your book then goes over negation. So the opposite of a proposition is called a negation. It's the opposite of a proposition. So for example, your book goes, so it sticks with these kind of examples. We'll do that. So the negation of Joan is sitting in the chair is Joan is not sitting in the chair. And you've got to be careful with this, because Joan is sitting in the chair is the proposition. The negation of that is Joan is not sitting in the chair. It is not, the negation is not Joan might be sitting in the chair, because both are true, right? So you've got to be careful to make the opposite of the proposition. Joan might be sitting in the chair is not the negation of her sitting in the chair, because it still could be true. Okay, so it's got to be the opposite. For the formula, okay, and if you guys don't have the book, if it hasn't come in yet. So if we've got 7 plus 9 equals 2 as the proposition, the negation would be 7 plus 9 does not equal 2, right? Which is the truth, okay? And again, it's fine. Both of these really are propositions, right? They're true and false statements, but they're opposites of each other, the negations of each other. Okay, if we represent a proposition with the letter P, and we're going to use this a lot, P is a proposition, okay? Then the negation gets, which is not P, is written with this symbol, and I forgot that since like tilde or tilde, something like that. But this would be the negation. So if this is the proposition, this would be the negation, okay? Sometimes they just say not P, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to shorthand it, P is the proposition, the little squiggle P is the negation of that proposition, okay? Yeah, a proposition has a truth value of either T or true or false, right? Remember, proposition's either true or false. The negation of a proposition is another proposition that makes the opposite claim of P. So oh wait, no, I'm just rewriting what I said. Now a truth table shows you the true and false nature of the proposition. So let's look at this. If I've got some proposition and I have its negation, okay? If I've got some proposition, I have its negation. If the proposition is true, and we're going to use T for true, if the proposition is true, then the negation must be false, okay? Then the negation must be false. This is a truth table. Look, Joan is sitting in the chair. If that's true, then the negation that Joan is not sitting in the chair must be false, okay? Or vice versa. If Joan is sitting in the chair is a false statement, then Joan is not sitting in the chair would be a truth statement. So this is called a truth table, okay? A truth table. Truth table, okay. So yeah, it says a truth table is a table with a row for each possible set of truth values for the proposition being considered. Look, we couldn't have both of these be true. The proposition and its negation can't both be true or both be false, okay? It's either true or false when it comes to this basic proposition and negation, okay? And then your book goes over, I guess, double negation. It says the Groucho Marx quotation in the margin I cannot say that I do not disagree with you. Maybe an extreme example, but many everyday statements contain double or multiple negations. We've already seen the negation not P as the truth table, or the truth value of the original proposition. The double negation not P must therefore have the same truth value as the original. So you can have not, which sounds goofy. So you could use two tildes. I'm going to just write it out. Not P. I mean, and just like in mathematics, two negatives get you back to the positive. Well, so this is not is going to bring you back to the original. So this would be true and this would be false, right? If you've got the proposition, its negation would be false if the proposition is true. Well, then in a way, you've got the negation of the negation, right? So therefore, this not is the negation of the negation. So therefore, it's going to be, if the negation's false, the negation of the negation is true. Okay, so this is called the double negation. Your book defines it as double negation. Okay, gives a few examples of that. Okay, and then let's get on to the actual conjunctions and disjunctions. So I've got to get your brain to think a little bit differently on the conjunction and disjunction. So first, your book talks about conjunctions. Now, conjunctions, grammatically, we're going to use and, okay? Grammatically, we're going to use the word and. And your book says these are, disjunction is what we're going to talk about next, is the or, and these are called logical connectors. So propositions, I'm reading in the middle of page 16. It just says that propositions are often joined together with logical connectors, such as and, or, and if then. For example, consider the following two propositions. The test was hard, I got an A, right? We got these two propositions. If we join the two propositions with and, we get a new proposition that reads, the test was hard and I got an A. If we join them with or, we get the statement, the test was hard or I got an A. Although such statements are familiar in everyday speech, we must analyze them carefully. So we really have to start thinking of these maybe not as the everyday speech we think of, but as like the math logical speak, okay? It's a little bit different. And now the book then starts with the and conjunction. An and statement is called a conjunction. According to the rules of logic, the conjunction P and Q is true only if P and Q are both true, okay? For example, the statement, the test was hard and I got an A, is only true if the test was actually hard and the person actually got an A, okay? So if you're going to use the and statement, both the propositions must be true for the conjunction statement to be true. Your book then defines it as given two propositions, P and Q. The statement P and Q is called their conjunction if it is true only if both are true. So if we did this with a truth table, okay, your book doesn't use there's another way to notate and. I'm just going to make sure. Okay, so if we do the truth table again, we've got P. Now, instead of negations, we're going to think of some other proposition. So this isn't the negation, it's just some other proposition, okay? And then we're going to look at the conjunction statement, P and Q, okay? So, I mean, let's think. We can just think of a goofy one. Let's say if P is Mr. Shirley lives in Norfolk, and then Q is just something random too, like what's something random? Does it matter? Why are these so hard on the spot? It doesn't matter. The Earth is not Actually, let's not use that. Is a sphere. Okay, so now look, we've got these two statements. Mr. Shirley lives in Norfolk. The Earth is a sphere. Totally not connected at all. That has nothing to do with anything. But if I tell you Mr. Shirley lives in Norfolk and the Earth is a sphere, look, both of those are true, right? And the only way for the and statement to be true is that both are true. Okay? The only way for the and statement to be true is that both of them have to be true, and both of these are. So if we change this to where, it was like, say the Earth is flat, right? Another fun conspiracy. If I said Mr. Shirley lives in Norfolk, which would be a true statement, but then I said, and the Earth is flat. So a false statement. Let's say Q was actually false. Well, the and statement would also be false because one of the propositions would be false in that statement. So if I said, look, Mr. Shirley lives in Norfolk and turns out the Earth is flat. Well, you go, whoa, wait a minute. That first one I can believe, but that second one's completely false. So therefore the and statement would be false because both of these have to be true for the and statement to be true. Okay. And then what if the first one was false? What if I didn't live in Norfolk? Okay. What if I actually lived in, Mountain Home? If I said, hey, Mr. Shirley lives in Norfolk and the Earth is a sphere, but you're like, wait a minute, no, Mr. Shirley lives in Mountain Home. I've seen him. He's my neighbor. Okay. So if this first one is false and the second one's true, the and statement would still be false because both have to be true for the and statement to be true. And then lastly, of course, if they're both false, Mr. Shirley lives in Mountain Home and the Earth is flat. Well, yeah, they're both just going to be false. Okay. So this is, and so these are really all the things that could happen with two statements, right? Two statements could be true. Well, the and, when you could join them with an and, that would be true as well. Well, the first one could be true, but the second one could be false. That means the and one's going to be false because with and, they both had to be true. And then same thing with the first one being false, second true. Well, that's still false. And of course, if they're both false, the and statement's false, right? If, whatever is false, okay? Like that's a pink pen and that's a green marker, right? Those are both false statements. So therefore, the and statement is false as well, okay? Your book then, it goes over, okay, it says evaluate. Let's do this one. It says evaluate the truth value of the following statements. Let me get a new piece of paper. I'm running out of paper. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to steal the example from your book on page 17. It says evaluate the truth value of the following two statements. The capital of Paris, or the capital of France is Paris. Of France is Paris. And Antarctica is cold. Okay. Of course, these are two distinct propositions, right? If I wanted to kind of separate them, I would say the first proposition is the capital of France is Paris, right? And then the second proposition is Antarctica is cold. Because both are true, right? Their conjunction would also be true. So therefore, if we made the statement P and Q would be true because both of these are true. If we go back to that truth table here, right? Look, if both are true, then the and statement would also be true. Well, both of these are true statements. The capital of France is Paris, true. Antarctica is cold, true. Therefore, the P and Q, the capital of France is Paris and Antarctica is cold, is a true statement. So what we started with, or what they gave us, was true. Okay, so then let's look at the second example. This was A. B is the same thing. The capital of France is Paris. And the capital of America is Madrid. Which, of course, this second statement is completely false. P is true still, right? Q, though, if we say Q is the capital of America is Madrid, is a completely false statement. The capital of America is not Madrid. The capital of the United States is Washington, D.C., but the capital of America is definitely not Madrid. So therefore, the P and Q statement would also be false because one of them is false, okay? So because one of them is false, they are definitely false. I'm sorry, this statement is false with the and, okay? We're going to do or here in a second, and in or they're going to be true, right? Because it just takes one. Now your book then goes over the triple conjunction. You're more than welcome to look at that, but it's there. It kind of makes sense. It just means that all three have to be true. If I added another, up here, the capital of France is capital of France is Paris, Antarctica is cold, and let's add some other statement. I'm wearing a black shirt, right? Mr. Shirley is wearing a black shirt. All three are true, so therefore it would be a true statement, and that's the only way it could happen. If that third statement was Mr. Shirley is wearing a pink shirt, it would be false because not all three were true. Okay, so now let's go to the other common logical, what do they call them? Logical connector. Yeah, logical connectors is the or statement. So the or statement starts on page 18, and it's called a disjunction. And that's the or statement. So the or is different in that either one of the statements could be true, and the disjunction would be true. So if you look at the truth table for R, it's a little different. So if we've got some statement P, we got some statement Q, and we know that P is true, and we know that I'm sorry, let's start this P or Q. We know that P is true and T is true, or Q is true, and then they're going to be true. Okay, but what's different is if either one of them is true, it's going to make the or statement true. So let's say the first premise is true, but the second one's false, kind of like that Madrid. If we said the capital of France is Paris, or the capital of America is Madrid, which is completely false, the or statement would still be true because one of them is true, okay? Because one of them is true. And same if we flip that, if the first one was false and the second was true, this would be true. Now, the difference though, or what's similar, are the first and the last. So if two are false, if both are false, then guess what? This is false as well. So both are true, it's true, but the difference lies in these middle two outcomes. If either one of them is true, the or statement means it must be true. Okay, it must be true. Okay, and you guys can, that makes sense. And you'll see that in the homework. So not that big of a deal. I don't know if I have time to finish all of this. 10 minutes. Okay. So then the book goes over the if-then statement. It says, look, another common way to connect propositions is the words if-then, as in the statement, if the politicians are liars, then Representative Smith is a liar. Statements of this type are called conditional propositions or implications because they propose something to be true, and then part of the statement on the condition that something else is true. We can represent a conditional statement as if Q then P. So yeah, so this is conditionals. And it's if Q then P. Okay, and it doesn't matter if it's Q or P, whichever one. It really depends on how it's written. Or well, let's get them in the right order for your book. They do P. If P, then Q. Okay, if P, then Q. So, and the book says, look, if I am elected, then the minimum wage will increase, right? So if I'm elected would be the P, then wages would increase, minimum wage would increase would be the Q. And now, so the proposition has the standard form if P, then Q, where, P is I'm elected, Q is the minimum wage. Because each individual proposition can either be true or false, we must consider 4 possible cases for the truth value of if P, then Q. So we're going to do the same thing again with P and then Q, but then we've got if P, then Q. So now, of course, we've got, look, if both are true, look, if the, I'm going to use the example in the book. If, the Jones was elected, which is true, and then minimum wage increased, then he kept his campaign promise, right? So therefore, her campaign promise, then therefore it was a true statement, right? But like, let's say Jones was elected, right? Which would be the true statement. If Jones was elected, but then she didn't keep her promise to increase, then this would be a false statement, right? This would be a false statement. If she was elected, but then she didn't increase the minimum wage, then this would be a false if then statement. And then, well, let's say she wasn't elected, but the minimum wage still increased. So in this case, in which Jones was not elected, but then yet the minimum wage still increased, the conditional statement makes a claim about what should happen in the event Jones was elected. Because she was not elected, she surely did not break any campaign promises, right? So because of this, it is a rule of logic that we consider Jones' claim to still be true, right? We can't say it was false because the first premise didn't even happen. And that's the same with the last one. Look, if it was false, this would still be true because in the end, she was not elected. So the if then is going to hold up. Really, it just doesn't hold up if the first statement holds up, but then the second doesn't. If the person's elected, but they don't hold up their end of the bargain, that would be a false statement. In all the other ways, it turns out to be a true statement. Kind of neat, okay? Your book then goes over conditional proofs. Just kind of running up against the clock here. And then I wanted to talk, actually, if I've only got a little bit of time, we're going to talk about converse, inverse, and contrapositive for the last 8 minutes here. So converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So it does have to do with the if-then statement, okay? So if the conditional statement is, if P, then Q. And your book uses this example, and I'm going to stick with it. It's in the middle of page 21. It says, look, if you are sleeping, then you are breathing, right? That would be the conditional statement. The converse is when you flip the P and the Q. So if Q, then P. So for the if you are sleeping, then you are breathing, the converse would be if you are breathing, then you are sleeping, which isn't true, right? I mean, that could easily be proven false because right now we are breathing, and hopefully behind those screens, you are not sleeping. And then third is inverse, which we just take the original and we negate it. If not P, then not Q, okay? So if you are not sleeping, then you are not breathing, which isn't true, right? I mean, we're doing that right now. We're not sleeping, but we are breathing, right? So not necessarily true. For that example, it's not true. And then lastly, we've got contrapositive. Contrapositive is when you flip it and negate it. So if not Q, then not, thin, I know that doesn't look like thin, then not P, okay? So if you are not breathing, then you are not sleeping, okay? No, you are not with us anymore, okay? So look, if the conditional is true, the contrapositive will always be true. Now, converse and inverse might still be true, but if the original is true, if the conditional is true, then the contrapositive will also be true. And your book does a truth table on these on the middle of 21. I would look at that. I would review over it. It's about 3/4 of the way down page 21. So it says, look, two statements are logically equivalent if they share the same truth values. If one is true, so is the other. And if one is false, so is the other. Okay. So it turns out if we go back to the if then statement, if P, then Q, I'm going to give you an example of this. The contrapositive, if not P, then not, if not Q, then not P. So this is the contrapositive. And this is the original conditional. Remember, we did the original conditional earlier. It was, T, F, T, T. Well, it turns out conditional and contrapositives have the same truth value, or they're logically equivalent. So this actually turns out to be TF, TT as well. Okay, so if two statements have the same truth table, then they're considered logically equivalent. That's at the very bottom of page 21. Okay, very bottom of page 21. So for homework, and let me check this again to make sure we're on the right. Yeah, for homework on this one, this is section 1B. We're going to do 1 through 91 odd. And I know you're like, oh my God, that's a ton of homework. Well, first off, it's not, because you're just stating a lot of times, is this a proposition? Is this not a proposition? Is this, write the truth table. This doesn't take long to do. This homework doesn't take long to do. And for this class, you guys have a week to get it done. So I want you to come in next